In 326 BC, Alexander the Great reached one of the strangest frontiers of his campaign. Ahead of him lay the Hydaspes River, broad, swollen, and dangerous in the season of rain. On the far bank stood King Porus. Porus was not a frightened ruler waiting to surrender. He chose to fight, and he had chosen his position well. The river itself was part of his defense. Any army trying to cross under enemy observation would risk confusion, broken formations, and disaster before the battle had even begun. But there was something else that made the Macedonians uneasy. War elephants, huge animals, unfamiliar to Alexander's men, capable of terrifying horses and breaking infantry formations by sheer weight and shock. Hydaspes would not be a normal battle. It would be shaped by water, mud, weather, and a dangerous enemy who understood how to use them. Alexander had crossed continents to reach this place. Now, on the edge of the known world, he faced one of the hardest battlefield problems of his life. Porus knew the river favored him. If Alexander tried to cross directly in full view, the Macedonians would arrive wet, disordered, and vulnerable. That was exactly the moment Porus wanted. So he watched the far bank carefully. Alexander answered with patience and deception. He moved troops along the river. He sent detachments up and down the bank. He created false signs of crossings and made noise where he did not intend to attack. This was not hesitation. It was preparation. He wanted Porus to keep guessing. He wanted every movement to look dangerous until none of them looked decisive. Day after day, the tension continued. Porus could not ignore Alexander, but he also could not throw his whole army at every movement on the river. That was the weakness Alexander was trying to create. Not a gap in the line yet, but uncertainty in the mind of the enemy. The battle would be won first through deception, and only then through force. At last, Alexander made his move. Far upstream, away from the most obvious point of observation, he led part of his army toward a concealed crossing site. Rain, darkness, and distance helped cover the operation. Even then, the crossing was dangerous. Men could lose contact. Horses could panic. Currents could disrupt formation before the army even reached the far bank. But the Macedonians kept moving. The crossing was not perfectly simple. Intermediate ground and broken river geography complicated the advance. Yet Alexander adapted quickly and pressed on. This was one of the most dangerous moments of the campaign. If Porus had struck with overwhelming force before Alexander's crossing group had organized, the battle might have ended in water and mud. But that did not happen. By the time Porus understood the scale of the crossing, Alexander had already done the hardest thing. He had crossed in force and formed for battle on the far side. The trap had failed. Now Porus would have to fight Alexander on land. When the battle fully developed, Porus placed his war elephants at the center of the field. This was a deliberate choice. The elephants were not only weapons of destruction, they were weapons of disruption. They could frighten horses, crush men, disturb timing, and break the rhythm on which ancient armies depended. For the Macedonians, this was a severe test. The ground was wet. The battlefield was unstable. Mud slowed movement and made control harder. Visibility was affected by haze, rain, and battlefield confusion. The center came under real pressure. This was not an easy or clean victory. Hydaspes was heavy, chaotic, and dangerous. The elephants mattered because they changed the emotional logic of battle. A formation that hesitates even briefly can begin to fail. And yet the Macedonians held. not without fear, not without strain, but they held. That endurance gave Alexander the chance he needed to search for a decisive turn in the battle. Alexander's greatest strength was not reckless courage. It was the ability to find the point where a battle could be decided. At Hydaspes, he did not try to solve the whole fight by smashing directly into the strongest part of Porus's line. Instead, he looked for imbalance. That is what made him dangerous. Even while the center was under pressure, he kept thinking in terms of movement, weakness, and opportunity. Where could pressure become disorder? Where could local success become general collapse? The answer lay in maneuver. Alexander's cavalry became the decisive instrument. By striking where Porus was less stable, he forced the battle away from the form Porus wanted. The elephants still mattered. The center still mattered. But now, the larger structure of Porus's formation was becoming harder to control. Once battle order began to loosen, even powerful weapons could add confusion instead of control. That was the turning point. Alexander converted battlefield pressure into operational momentum. And once Porus's army began to lose coherence, defeat moved much closer. In the end, Porus was defeated. But he was not broken in spirit. That is one of the reasons the Battle of the Hydaspes remained so memorable. Porus had fought hard. He had used the river well. He had brought elephants into the battle with real force. And even after defeat, he still carried himself like a king. Ancient tradition preserves the famous answer he gave when Alexander asked how he wished to be treated, like a king. Whether every word was recorded exactly is less important than what the story reveals. Alexander respected courage, and Porus had shown it. Instead of destroying him, Alexander restored him as a subordinate ruler and expanded his authority. So Hydaspes ended not only as a victory, but as a political settlement. Yet the battle also revealed something deeper. This was one of Alexander's last great victories. Soon after, his army would refuse to march farther east. So Hydaspes stands at a strange place in his story, a triumph, but also a sign of the limits of conquest. On the banks of the Hydaspes, Alexander proved once again that his genius could survive weather, rivers, mud, and elephants. But he also learned that empire, no matter how great, always has an edge.